Welcome back to my continuation of this series where we're building out this layout that you can see right here. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. If you missed the first video, you might want to check that one out where we set the stage, made a whole bunch of utility classes based on custom properties that we created and sort of got things up and running. If you'd rather skip all of that, there is a link to where I finished everything off in the previous one. So there's a GitHub repo. You can just take that, fork it off, and follow along from there. And that's where we are right here. So if you did do that and you have forked it off, all you need to do is come into here and do an npm install to make sure all of the dependencies are installed in here. And then we can do an npm run dev and our project is up and running. And then we can control click to open it up and we can see we have not very much happening and we need to, that's what we're doing in this video, is a lot is going to get done in this one. So let's come through, or a lot when it comes to like getting something that we'll actually have something to look at on the page this time, right? So let's close the terminal down and jump right into here so we can get rid of my hello there. We don't need that anymore. And we're going to have a few different things. So I'm actually going to keep Front-End Mentor open, but or Figma, I should say, but let's sort of do this. When I write my HTML, I tend to look at the most complicated version of what the layout will look like. And then when I write my CSS, we're going to see most of the CSS is going to be mobile first. But I like looking at the desktop version is very important for the structure of what our project will be. So I'm going to keep that open, but we're going to move it down a little bit. And just by moving it down, it just lets me look at what I'm trying to achieve here, and we can sort of see things as they're appearing on the screen if we need to. And this will start showing the value of those custom properties. And so, yeah, let's come in here. We don't actually need an H1 here at the top. What do we want to have? We want to have a header, right? Yes. So we're going to do a header at the top. So that's going to be up here. Now I think it's going to be the only one we have, but I am going to do a class of primary header, because you're allowed to have multiple headers on a page. There's no limitation on how many you have, and sometimes it makes sense to have headers within other areas. Even like a card, an article, there's different stuff you might want to use your header. Or when I say card, I should have said section. But yeah, we're going to have our header that's going to be across the top here. So in there, we're going to have a container, which we don't have a class for yet. So we're going to have to build that in, but that's going to be, it's going to hold everything together here. Really quickly, I could do one big container that would go and like group everything up until this carousel or this slider down here together. I tend to try and avoid doing things like that because, again, this is a project that's never going to change, but assuming that the project could change in the future, maybe at one point a big background color gets added here and then that sucks. And there's actually ways around that. Either you change your HTML and fix it and stuff, but it's much easier when you don't have to start like playing around with that or coming up with hacky solutions. So I tend to do like containers as I need them within sections instead of having one big one. So yeah, we're going to do a container that's going to be in there. And again, that's just going to set our max width on there. And then we need a few different things. We actually have 3 pieces here. And interestingly, this button disappears at small screens. I don't see it anywhere. So that's okay. That's easy enough to do. But let's come here. Now, there's a few different ways actually we could approach that. And I don't know what the get started button would do. We have it all over the place. I'm going to assume it's actually a button, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's do our logo first. The logo, we're going to be using Flex because we need to have these 3 that are next to each other. So there's also different ways we can approach this. I didn't make any Flex utility classes yet, and you sort of need to decide if we want to have that. So I'm also trying to think if this get started would be part of my navigation, but I don't think so. So I think what we're going to do is out here, let's just do an A. It's going to go to the home page. It has nowhere to go. And then here we're going to have our logo. So image, the source is, if you are using Vite like we're doing, it's just in my images. Logo, do we have logo? Logo.svg, that makes it easy. So images, logo.svg. And then if I come to my alt, I'm just going to write manage. I go back and forth on what to put on alt tags. Is it just like, do we really need one? It's decorative. It's just a logo. One thing that's important here is don't make this your H1. It doesn't really make sense for the logo to have like a hidden H1 for the name of the company. It's not going to help with SEO or things like that. Like just make it what you need it to be. So I think we can just do that. Here we're going to have our nav. So class is going to equal to primary navigation, and we might come back in here just because we have my primary navigation here and we have another navigation here that are actually, are they identical? Oh no, they're not. I thought they were the same. They're actually, oh, career. We're gonna have to think about it a little bit. Because to me, this is definitely a nav, and to me, this one down here is also a nav. So we're gonna have to look at the semantics of that a little bit, because when we do have multiple navs, there's no problem with that. We can definitely have them, but we just need to make sure that they're clearly distinguished as separate navigations. And so my nav will do a ul li times 5, and again, I'm using Emmet, so I'm writing it like this, and then I hit tab, and it just puts out everything I need. Except in those, I also want each one to be a link. Then we can hit tab. I'm going to middle mouse click down and just drag it down to put my cursor in all of those, to then put my hashtag. And then I can come through and just fill these out really fast. So I'll see you in a second. Cool. And hit save. We can go, stuff is showing up. Now, one thing that's important here when it comes to these, and yeah, just to circle back quickly to using Emmet, if you don't know Emmet, you haven't seen it before, I'll link to a video in the description and maybe pop a card up now as well that sort of show you how it works, because yeah, it's super handy and lets you write your HTML much faster. So that's that. So this container, I'm just trying to think, this container, I don't mind that container also doing flexy stuff. So yeah, let's leave it like that. This UL, let's give this a class, actually. I wasn't going to. We'll do class of... and we're going to do two things, actually. We're going to do a role of list. The reason we put the... role. The reason we do a role of list often in these cases is when we do a list style of none, there's some screen readers that no longer treat it as a list. They won't announce it as a list. And at least from what I understand from this point of view, and if there's somebody who's an accessibility expert who's listening who wants to comment, please let me know if I'm off on this. But at least for navigations, it can be handy to when people know they're coming across multiple items, how many there are and things like that, because lists will announce how many there are in there. And then the class on here, let's just call it a nav. Call it nav list. I'm not, just because it's going to be different from this one. But I don't know if we need any special... that footer is going to be interesting. Okay, it's all good though. This is there, and then the last thing we need, we're still inside of my container. Right after the nav, we can throw a button that's going to have a class of dot button. And does it need? Are all the buttons the same? We have this orange button. We have a white button, and an orange button. And it seems to be like, to me, the standard regular button is this one. And then like others, we could have other ones. So we could have a white button, and maybe you'd have a dark button or something in different situations. But to me, this is the default button. So I'm just going to style that as a default button. Some people don't like this approach. They like doing button, which is like this naked button that doesn't have, it sets the stage. And I've done this 100 times before in a bunch of demos. Where you set the stage and then you have like a class of primary that's going to alter what it looks like, or a secondary or an inverse or whatever it is. We'll talk more about that when we get to the white button. But for now, I'm just going to do the class of button on there, which is my get started. And there we go. So let's come down to this next part over here. And I mentioned this in the previous video where we have like two sections, but the nice thing with it is they both are this like 2-column setup. So let's come down here. We're going to do a main, and then how are we going to do this? We have our main. Our main has 3 things in it. It has these 3 sections. So we have sort of this hero area here, this section here, and then the carousel. Oh, and then a call to action as well. So we have the 4 different pieces that will be in my main. What I want to do, yeah, so we have this 2-column here. This is just going to be a display. This is a 2-column as well, with that being shot over all the way to the right side, which is easy enough. And then here we have 4 columns, but this one to me is almost like a 3-column. They're also not equal columns down here at the bottom by the looks of it, because this is pretty narrow. Is that equal? I'm just trying to really... I don't think the spacing here is equal. But it might just be because these are so short. We're going to treat that as equal, I guess. Okay, so maybe the easiest thing to do When it comes to columns, I'm a bit different than most people, whereas I like using grid, and I'll explain why once we start laying it out and making the classes to make that work. We're going to do our main. So in my main, well, we need a container for here. Should we do a section? Let's do a section. Sections don't actually impact things like a lot of people think if they don't have a title on them or like an area labeled by and stuff, but I don't really think we need to break this into actual sections. I think it's fine. I like using section here instead of a div. So this could be, I don't need a class. There's nothing special coming on this section. So in that section, we'll do a container. Inside that container, let's just do even columns for now. And when we style this up, we'll come back into this a little bit more. But with my even columns, we just need 2 divs. So one for the left and one for the right. I'm pretty sure I could use the even columns for all of these, other than down here. I think we'll be okay. So even columns is that. Then, so in the first one here, we can have my H1 finally, which we do have some stuff set up for this. So this would be my font size primary heading. It's also going to be a font weight of bold. And the color is actually going to be the default color. These paragraphs are the same color as this, but their opacity has been changed. And we are going to have to dive into that a little bit, but we can come in with that and then copy this, paste it in there. So we should see it. There we go. It's a big font size and it's bold. I was worried that it was the wrong, but no, I think we're okay for that. Perfect. I was like, yeah, it's good. Then we have a paragraph after that. So we can do AP and we have a button after the paragraph, except Emmet doesn't want to work. There we go. So in the paragraph, I can put that text, and then in my button, once again, it's get started. And this should be a class of button. Awesome. Then we have this side here, and if we look at the assets we got for when we got all of this, illustration intro is an SVG. I'll link to this extension because I have this extension that shows us what you can like see the SVG within VS Code, which is always super handy. So that's the one I want to put there. And we also have this background thing that has to be on the page as well. So I think, and because the way the background thing sort of comes through at the different size as well, it is kind of attached to here. I think I'm going to do that as a pseudo element, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But I don't want to do it as unless I did it as a background image on the page. But even like we have this one down here, that's going to be kind of, we're probably going to do it as a pseudo element. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. That's sort of the thought I have right now, is it's going to be a pseudo element though. Because even it'd be positioned absolute, we can sort of get it where we need it to. The overflow won't cause an issue. Then this one that changes here, like this could be a pseudo element on this div that we're going to have set up here, which is fine because then that's here and it's going to change how it's positioned and stuff, but it shouldn't be much of an issue. So I think we'll be okay for that. So in this div, I think the only thing we need is the image. So image, I'm just doing, it's SVGs, but I'm just bringing them in. So it's images, and then it was the illustration intro. And then you have to decide for the alt text here, is this something that is important or is it just decorative? So, you know, it could be bars and graphs and percentages, but like looking at this, they're all meaningless. There's no value that's really coming from here. It's not showing me something very specific. It's really just bars and graphs and percentages. If it was showing the actual user interface, maybe then it's like, you know, this could be like screenshot of the interface showing bars and whatever you describe what it's showing. In this case, I really feel like it's decorative and it's not really doing this really big improvement for what we're needing to look at. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and that will be fine. And just as I was saying that, I just had to think back. Our navigation, we will have to come through and add a button and do other stuff here for the mobile version of it. But that'll come in the next video when we actually start styling that. For now, I just want to get sort of the basic structure down, and then we're going to come through in each section. We'll figure things out and sort of adapt them as we need to. So yeah, that's for there. Cool. So that's that section done. We can come down to this next section here. Once again, we have a container. Inside that container, we'll do our even columns again. Inside this even columns, the first side is easy. So that will first be so div times 2 for the 2 even columns again. And in the first div here, we need to do, so it's an H2 with a font size of secondary heading. And I do longer class names often. I know some people might want like SH just to keep it shorter. I like it, I just like going longer. So secondary heading and font weight of bold as well on that one. You could do something that every time it's a secondary heading, it is also bold. But again, I like having a little bit of, you can mix and match a little bit better this way. And it's not that bad having to put an extra thing on there, right? So yeah, there we go. That can go there. And then let's come in with my paragraph. I realize there's side scrolling here, so some stuff is a little bit cut off, but if you really need to get the code and just like make sure you're following along with this, the GitHub repos and all of that, you can follow and see everything that I've written in those. And it's easier to follow those things when they're written in front of you anyway, than having to pause videos and stuff, right? So let's bring this paragraph in there. And then the fun part, and I said this when I was analyzing the page a little bit, is how would we set this up and how are we going to create this? One way we could do it is with markers, and maybe we could style the marker to look like this. I know there's some limitations on the styling you can do on a marker, but there's also the problem that it won't work on Safari right now, which I only recently found out. What's different about Manage? Track company-wide progress. 2, advanced built-in reports. 3, everything you need in one place. Does it need to be a numbered list? Not really. To me, this is more, the numbers are there like visually representing that, but it's more just a list of things. The order of these isn't important. It's not saying you have to do step 1 first, then do 2, then do 3. So the order here is not as important. So I think what we're going to do is do this as an unordered list, which let's give that the role equals list again. Yeah. It's going to be that. So then in there, we'll do an li times 3. And inside each li, so we can actually, let's come inside each li, we're going to have what's different about Manage, an H3, which will be my font size. I think it's a 600. I might be wrong on that. Font weight of bold. And actually, I just realized I should put all of this inside of parentheses, because if you're doing emit and you have the parentheses, then I can do +p, and it keeps, actually, maybe I didn't need the parentheses. Let's just hit save. So yeah, each li has an H3 for the title, and then a paragraph for that. And that's completely fine. You can put pretty much anything you need to in LIs. They're not limited in what's available to put in them, basically. And I think it makes sense to do it this way. So each one of them, yeah, I think that makes sense. Maybe because these are all with H3s, you don't actually need this to be a list. Because when we're using the H3s here, it's sort of creating, we have like our section title is this, and then this is like 3 subtitles within that area. So we're breaking it into these 3 smaller pieces. So maybe they don't actually need to be lists. Which, yeah, and I know we get a little bit of listitis, I think is what they call it, when we sort of overdo lists every now and then. I will give this a class. We're going to call this one class numbered items. Sure. The class naming is hard. Which is why I like utility classes, because they take a lot of that trouble out of things. I think we'll go with that. I'm sort of going to skip over what I'm going to do here, because we're going to have to come back, but let's just set up section, and I will give this a class of carousel. And we're going to revisit this when we actually get the carousel set up and working. Just because, yeah, that one's going to be a little bit more involved. I guess we could do, let's do the simple parts of here. H2 of font size, secondary heading, plus a button class of button. So secondary heading, what they've said. And then here we can just say that this is a carousel here, and then close button. And then my button is my get started. Cool. And then we can come for the last. So this section is the first time we're actually going to get to use this. So my section class is going to be equal to bg primary 400. So we actually set the background color, and then we can say that the text on here is my text neutral 100, which is my white color. And by putting this on the section itself, that at least inherits down to this. We have a background image there too. Okay, so we're also going to come here. I'm going to do this as my CTA, which is short for call to action. And I'm going to put a pipe here. You don't need to do this. This is just personal preference. I got this from Andy Bell with Cube CSS, where this is more of like the CTA is like my component, and these are utility classes. So it's just to separate utility classes from components visually. So you can just, like, if you're quickly looking, you can sort of see groupings. He does it more with square brackets around each one. I've just come to use the pipe more often. So yeah, this is just like an invalid class. It doesn't cause any issues. It doesn't do anything. It's really just for visual representation on the page. And I'll link more to Cube CSS in the description of this video as well. So in here, we need a container once again. In my container, we want an H2, and you might be, simplify how your team works today, get started. Is that really an H2? With no other text there, it's kind of weird in a way. But it's not really, like, if not, it follows. So what they've said, we've set this up as an H2, and the way the headings work is like that H2 is making a section for all the stuff under it. It doesn't matter that it's inside a section or not with how I'm doing this. So it's just saying like, okay, from here until we get to another H2, this is like a section of content effectively. All the content after this H2 is related to that H2 until we get to another one, which the next H2 will create a new grouping of content to think about it. Sort of like chapters in a novel or something like that, or chapters in a textbook. Because there's no other text. So what they've said, simplify how your team works today. Like maybe that's a paragraph, and it's just, I don't know if it needs to be a heading. I'm going to do it as one, but this is where I like I could do a paragraph with my font size secondary heading font weight bold. I could do that, right? And it doesn't break anything. The styling of it's fine. And this is what I talked about when I set this up, is the reason I like doing that font inherit in my reset is it doesn't mean I'm using an H2. And it's why I'm not linking my styles to an H2, is because you will get designs where the visual style of it doesn't really correspond to the class that you want to be using, or not the class, the element that you should be using in that case. So yeah, I'm wondering if I should do that there or not, but I did forget my even columns. So that will go there. In the even columns, we will do a div *2. And this paragraph, not convinced it's a paragraph, but I'll give that some more thought. And then this will be my button class of button with, once again, get started. Now, actually, this is interesting because it's a white button. So this is another part of Cube CSS where when you have things, rather than, I got an error here because I did something wrong, but we'll fix that in a second. I think I'm missing a closing div, actually. There we go, fixed it. So my button, instead of doing like a button, whatever, inverse here, or even the, if you're doing the BEM style, it's like this. I'm going to do a here of a data attribute. And so data type is going to be equal to inverse or inverted. I'm going to do inverted. And there's not really like this hard, fast rule on why to do this over the other one. It's personal preference. But the main idea with it is by doing it as a data attribute, you're not going to have a data type of inverted, like you want to have like an inverted secondary because you can't have two types on something. Whereas with here, you could do a button secondary, button inverted. It doesn't make sense to do it, but like it's not broken. It's just going to use whichever one is second, right? So, and you're not going to put two data attributes that are fighting each other. It's just a way to sort of say like, oh, I'm modifying it through a data attribute instead. Nothing too much complicated there. If you don't like that, then just put it as a class. It's perfectly fine. But I'm going to do it that way. Cool, so that's my section that's set up there. Then we need to get out of my main, actually. So here's my main closing off, and then we can come to my footer. And in my footer, we're gonna have here, we can do a class. One thing I didn't do is set up padding classes on spacing and stuff. And I was looking at the spacing. Sorry, I'm sidetracking a little bit. The spacing's not perfectly even, so we're gonna see sort of how I'm gonna tackle that. We might take a very simple approach. These have the same padding. Anyway, we'll sort of gonna do that once we start styling things up a little bit. But footer class here will be my BG neutral 900, which is my dark color, and once again a text neutral 100, which is white. So that can cascade through, and we can set that up. In there, we can do a container. Container. In my container, we can do a even columns, which I'm hoping is going to work for this one. The only yes, sorry, I'm just thinking as I'm doing this, but okay, I should be talking about what I'm thinking about. I haven't. This to me is almost like one, like home, pricing, products, about us, careers, community, privacy policy. If I look up here, like the community is part of this. So like this is the navigation. Like these are all, this is a navigation as well. I want to keep this as like one nav basically. So if I did this as 3 columns, I think that would be fine. So my even columns would be just be 3 columns in this case. So yeah, I think we can do that. Even columns. And then in here, we're gonna have a few different things. Even columns. So in my even columns, we're gonna have 3 divs. Div times 3. In the first div, we're doing this part here first. So this one, we want to have my, and the reason that I know this is like one div that's going here is just because this list, like the social icons, they're not underneath here. Like they're like this is one column, another column, another column. So I'm treating this as one box. To separate them like that, there's a few different ways we could do it. We'll get there when we get there, I think. We're going to need some extra flex and stuff going on anyway. So here my div class. Let's do my, I guess this would be the same as what we had up here actually, where we have a link that's the logo that brings us back to the homepage, because that's usually what you have in these cases. And then after that link, we want to have a list. So I'm going to do a UL of, we're going to do the role is equal to list, because this is definitely something that would be a list. It's also on here. I'm going to do an area label. There's 2 ways we could do this. Should we do it like that? Because this list, it's going to be our social icons, so we'll do them pretty quickly. So it's ULLI times 5. Inside each one of those is a link. Yeah, so like let's just, I'm not actually going to set the links because it would have to go to like the company pages, but you know, we have our Facebook, YouTube, etc., etc. The important thing with these is because they're only icons on each one of these, there's no text on them. For each one of these links, I would do an area label. So the first one would be Facebook. And this is important. So if somebody is using a screen reader, you know, these assistive technologies don't know what an icon is. They just see that, oh, there is an icon here. So it's important, if there's no actual text in a link, it's just an image, that you have something that explains what that image is. So this would be, you know, this is going to YouTube, this is going to Twitter, this is going to Pinterest, so on and so forth. Pinterest and Instagram. And the other thing that's important here with this list is we sort of want to say, like, when we see it, we know it's a list of the social places that this company exists on. So here's my list of social networks. You don't go through this like explicitly. It's just like this thing that you see, it makes sense right away. But imagine somebody's coming across this and they can't see the page. It's being read out to them. They get to they go list 5 items, and then it's going to read Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, because we've put these labels here. That doesn't actually tell the full story, or we could tell a bigger story. Because again, you look here, you know that it's a list of social icons before you even like start looking for the specific social network. So if you don't care about it, you ignore it. And if you do care about it, you move on. Whereas if a screen reader comes across this, they can't make that decision if they want to ignore this list until they get to that first item. Well, you know, I can't, as a sighted user, I could decide to skip over it. Well, let's give them that option as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm also going to add an area label to the list itself. And if you have a heading that could correspond to the list, you could also do an area label to by and link, like you could label it by an H2 or something. You just use an ID to label it. And we could even create like a hidden one, but in this case, I think it's okay just to do like social links, let's say. So they're going to get to a list, and instead of saying like list 5 items and then they go to the first one, it says Facebook, then they go to the next one, like this is going to get to the list. It's going to say that the title of it is social links, and it's going to tell them there's 5 items in there. This means they can make that decision on whether they want to go through those different links before they actually get to the Facebook one. So they get to the list and it goes list 5 items, social links, or social links 5 items. They go, no, I don't care. They can skip that and go to the next piece of information on the site. So just like us, when we see something, we can dismiss it because we're not interested in their social media presence. So one of those things that can be really nice and handy on there. So that's this. Now we're going to come into here. And I think what we're going to do, and I'm hoping this works, we're going to do a nav again, because to me this is another navigation. We're going to have to look up, so this is going to be an OL, UL, LI times 7. Yeah, each one of those will have a link in it. Perfect. So this will get a role is equal to list once again. Perfect. Then what I'm trying to think of now, so this will be class as footer nav. We had primary nav, footer nav. What I'm going to have to look up now is let's do A11Y multiple nav. I've done a video on this, but I don't remember. Best practices is it different area labels? It is different area labels to say the different, so to make them different. And so like here we have, it's saying like you can do your primary, or you don't need primary navigation. Area label of primary is going to say, and again, if you have a heading that could correspond, you could use the heading instead. I don't in either case. So it would be primary. This isn't a second. See, the problem with this, like to me, this is a navigation. It's a bigger navigation than the one that's going to be at the top of our page because it has more things that we're linking to. So what do we name that? Right? And even like I was originally going to sort of do a nav and then maybe a separate thing, but for the second one. So anyway, let's do that because they are different. If they were the same list of links, then you don't have to do it, or you can give them the same area label. That's fine as well. But let's come here when your area label. Label is going to be equal to primary. And then I guess I don't know what a good area label is for this. Area label. Let's just see on that site if they do give us any other examples. It's not really related content. Area role navigation. Oh, that's because it's not a div. That's fine. I don't want to do that. So they are doing footer. So I guess I'll go with that. I'm not, if anybody knows a better name for these like longer navigations that you do find typically in a footer, let me know in the description below, just because, yeah, it's something that I'm not too sure about on what like footer navigation. And then I guess it's different. Maybe you assume that's a longer one. I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, let me know if there is a better name, or footer is fine there if you do know more about that. And yeah, I'll be back in 1 second. I'm just going to bring all of these things in here. Awesome, so that is done. And then next is this little guy over here. So that's my last column. And so I guess we're going to do a little form. We're not going to make this work, so I'm not going to stress too much about that. That could be a way to level up, because we are going to host this on Netlify. So you could actually get this working with, yeah, I guess you could, there's no form to submit, right? This is more like you'd be integrating with a service that collects email addresses. So they would probably give you the code to put here. So, right, that's what I would be doing anyway. you'd have like a service that you use for newsletters or whatever. So I'm just going to worry really about the styling of it and not the integration of that for this one. But you can use different things to get this to work. So in the form, we're going to have an input, which is going to be a type equals email plus a button with the I was going to set it to submit. I think by default, a button in a form will do submit. And if you don't want it to submit, then you'd set the type to button. So I think we can just leave a regular button there and go with a class is button. Yeah, I think that should actually be enough to do that. And then we have the copyright underneath. So for the copyright, we're going to have a class that's actually going to push things down. So let's just do P of copyright, grab all of that. And yeah, that is the HTML more or less finished. I just realized, I'm thinking now, let's just see, the order of things here is a bit of a nightmare. Oh no, Kevin. So the form goes on top rather than on the bottom. The logos, oh my goodness, okay. That's going to give us an interesting topic of discussion when we get to this part over here, when we're styling all of that up. But for now, I'm going to leave this off here. We finished all the HTML. And so yeah, in the next video, we're going to start writing the CSS to start making this thing come alive a little bit more and not being left where we have this right now. And I just see one of my utility classes, I must have made a typo because it's not working for the font colors or my background color there. We'll figure all of that out as we sort of go through things and help everything come together. But until then, I want to say a very big thank you to my supporters of Awesome over on Patreon, Jan, Johnny, Patrick, Simon, and Tim, as well as all my other patrons for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.